Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Typically at this hour and from this desk, we report on and analyze politics. We rarely step aside for weather. Hurricane Milton is not weather. It is a serious, serious storm. It is currently barreling across the Gulf of Mexico. If you look on the screen, that's where it is right now. Milton is set to hit central Florida. We don't know precisely where in just a few hours. Florida already feeling the effects of this storm's outer bands. Massive rain, wind, all of this hitting Florida's western coast. Among the things officials are afraid of, in addition to wind and rain, storm surge. We don't know how high that storm surge will be, 6 feet, 10 feet. There are suggestions it could be as much as 15 feet high. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Floridians have already fled the projected path. State and local officials, having exhausted themselves in issuing evacuation warnings, have now told those who have decided to hunker down to prepare for life-threatening conditions. As you might expect, President Biden has been briefed on the storm. We expect to hear from the president this hour on federal preparations and response. We will bring you those remarks live when they happen. In the meantime, here is what we have already heard from state, local, and federal officials.
There is high confidence that this hurricane is going to pack a major, major punch and do an awful lot of damage.
Hurricane Milton is going to be a deadly and catastrophic storm.
If you're, for lack of a better word, dumb enough to think you can ride it out, write your name and a next of kin phone number on your arm or something with a Sharpie, so that when we come retrieve you the next day, we know who to call.
We start tonight with Jonathan Vigliotti, who joins us from Tampa, Florida. Jonathan, I can barely see you. I hope you're doing all right. Catch us up on what you are experiencing there in Tampa.
Yeah, good evening to you, Major. We were actually reporting earlier from the Bay Area, but had to retreat from that water because of flash flooding. You could see the rain, this band really whipping here. High winds, already 4 inches of rain have fallen. And we're expecting upwards of 18 inches. You can see as they're wiping off our lens. That's going to probably be happening throughout this report. The rain coming down, going to pick up significantly. We're still hours away from landfall. The time to evacuate has expired. Those that have chosen to stay put are now going to be riding out a storm that the mayor here in Tampa has described as unsurvivable. There are a number of threats. The first one, obviously, storm surge. In some areas, we're being told here in the Tampa Bay area as much as 12 to 15 feet, as you mentioned. Then, of course, the hurricane force winds and the flash flooding that we have already experienced. It's going to be a very difficult process. I think one of the biggest concerns from what we have seen here is just all the debris from Hurricane Helene 2 weeks ago. This was a community that was literally cleaning up from that storm when it had to put everything down to evacuate. So now you've got all this high wind. It doesn't take a lot of it to push all that debris, making it deadly projectiles. You have thousands of first responders that have come here to the region. You have more than 24 search and rescue teams that are staged here in Tampa. They're going to be sheltering in place through this hurricane, meaning if there is an emergency call, they will not be able to respond until after Hurricane Milton passes. Then you have also the response to power. We're being told 50,000 line crews are being brought here to the state from as far west as California. Officials are warning that the power could be out in some places for several weeks before that power is turned back on, Major.
And Jonathan, are there places there for people to stay, meaning shelters or some kind of place other than their residence if they so seek that?
And that's a great point, and that is one that Governor DeSantis in a press conference earlier today, when there was still time to evacuate to higher ground, made. Because now it is too dangerous to go to great distances to escape this storm. But there are shelters set up throughout the Tampa area that residents can access. If you are living in a low-lying area here along the coast, if you have a one-story home especially, you need to evacuate. You can still do so safely in short distances. You're not going to want to wait until 2 hours from now when the brunt of Milton really starts to bear down.
And we can see some minor vehicular traffic behind you, Jonathan. As always, stay safe, you and your crew. Thank you so much for joining us. Much appreciated, Jonathan Vigliotti in Tampa. CBS News meteorologist David Yeomans joins us now. David, you've been guiding our audience all day expertly through this storm. Catch us up on what you're seeing and what you believe we should anticipate in the next couple of hours.
The storm's eye, if you missed this earlier, is just 45 miles off the coast of Sarasota, piling water over the barrier islands. Storm surge flooding now penetrating far inland as well. The storm is still moving northeastward directly toward Tampa Bay. It is expected to take a bit of a right turn shortly, which would put the most likely landfall location right over Sarasota, Florida. That's most likely this evening, Eastern time, between 8 p.m. and midnight tonight. In those areas, conditions will deteriorate rapidly as the core of the eye wall around the clear eye in the center of the storm approaches. Winds in these coastal communities will easily gust over 110 miles per hour.
From your vantage point, understanding these storms, David, what's the most dangerous component part, not only as it makes landfall, but as it moves across the state?
Well, it's actually not wind in these storms, Major, that's the major killer. It is water. Both storm surge flooding in coastal communities, the rise of the ocean that overtakes people's first or second floors of their homes, but also freshwater flooding. This storm is fast moving, so we're going to have hurricane force winds across the Florida peninsula from Tampa to Orlando, all the way to the East Coast and Daytona Beach. Also in these inland areas, up to 1.5 feet of rain is possible, leading to another rare high risk of flash flooding diagnosed by the National Weather Service. Unfortunately, these high risk days only come around about once a month, but they lead to more than 1/3 of all flood-related fatalities. This is the same risk that we saw, Major, just 2 weeks ago in North Carolina from Hurricane Helene.
And David, very quickly, there have been reports today of lots of tornadoes spinning off even as the storm approaches. How big a risk is that?
Tornadoes are a huge risk, and of course you don't have as much warning with a tornado as you do with this hurricane, which we've seen coming for several days. Most of the Florida peninsula, at least from Tampa and Orlando southward, is under a tornado watch through the night tonight. Hurricanes produce tornadoes frequently as they make landfall due to the pre-existing spin that's already in the atmosphere. So far, as of a few minutes ago, Major, we've had 14 reported tornadoes, and that count is increasing by the minute.
David Yeomans, thank you very much. Scott MacFarlane joins us now from the White House. Scott, summarize what you've heard today and the federal preparation and response.
Major, it is unique and noteworthy how much time and energy was spent in the administration and at the White House today simply pushing back on the misinformation and the toxic wave of conspiracy theories that have circulated around Hurricane Helene and forthcoming Hurricane Milton. It's the president himself, it was the White House press secretary, the FEMA administrator, all taking time today to try to push back on these theories that, first of all, that the government controls the weather, that FEMA is somehow an operation trying to seize land in hurricane zones, and all the other things that go into this conspiracy theory that the government rerouted disaster money to help undocumented migrants. All of that provably false, but all of that was part of the White House's day today. Haven't seen that before as an administration has to prep for a hurricane. Take a listen to just some of it from earlier today.
There's been a reckless, irresponsible, and relentless promotion of disinformation and outright lies that are disturbing people. It's undermining confidence in the incredible rescue and recovery work that has already been taken and will continue to be taken. And it's harmful to those who need help the most.
It's intentional to create distrust, and that level of distrust is, as the president said earlier today, un-American. And what we need to do is make sure people can get the assistance that they need and they deserve.
On that projection screen coming from North Carolina was the FEMA administrator. There are any number of consequences, Major, to this type of disinformation during a national emergency, but I think the primary one, echoed by members of the White House team today, is that they don't want this to get in the way of people evacuating. They want people to have faith and trust in what the government is saying about the danger of Milton and to get out of there.
And also, it's worth noting at this present time, Scott, unless you're on the eastern part of Florida, the time to evacuate on the western part of Florida has passed. You need to hunker down and stay where you are, as David Yeomans just summarized and Jonathan Vigliotti shared with us just a moment ago. As for the preparations, how did the White House describe what it's put in place?
They count things, in gallons and liters and in boxes and cartons, all the water they've gotten ready, all the emergency supplies they've gotten ready. But also they're doing this with a dual mission, obviously. They also have to continue their efforts to help Helene in western North Carolina, getting supplies there. All of this also is happening in the backdrop of a funding need for FEMA. They insist they have enough money to get through these two hurricanes, but that they are in one of those precarious positions until Congress appropriates more money, where they may be at risk of having to pause some of the longer-term projects they have underway elsewhere in the country. That tends to happen at the end of fiscal years in Septembers and Octobers, but this is going to be a paramount issue, getting them more money when Congress returns here in mid-November.
Part of the to-do list after the election. Scott MacFarlane at the White House, thank you very much.